AITA for finally kicking a best friend out of my house. Let me start this with, my boyfriend and I were put into a very lucky situation with a house. However, it is still in my mother's name, and she could easily evict us, especially since she does not know about any of this from me. She may have heard some from neighbors, but that's about it. I 27 female, and my boyfriend 24 male, who ill called John for clarification, have been living in our current house for 3 years. We moved in because my parents owned 2 houses, and my grandma was too old for her own 40 acres of land. So my parents moved my grandma into one house that was paid off, and asked John and I if we wanted to finish paying off the other house while living in. My mom and I have an agreement where I pay a little less for the mortgage because I have health issues, and am unable to work as many hours, and the house itself needs a lot of work that John and I are doing out of pocket. So it was a win-win for everyone. Things changed. But that's just backstory to the real issue. I have a friend 28 female, who ill called Jane, who goes away for work every summer. Her long-term relationship ended, and she needed a place to stay for the winter with her dog. John and I were happy to share a room in our house, and gave her a very reasonable rent fee of $150 a month. The room was very small, but she had her own full bathroom, and basically the entire upstairs to herself. That year we had small issues. It was new and John and I were still figuring out living together, and we also all 3 worked together. It was a lot of time together, and not enough time alone. During this time, Jane is dating a guy that's married but planning to leave her, aren't they all? So the whole time Jane is here, all she does is cry about her man. At one point, I even stop her and tell her I needed a friend to listen to me vent. However, she cries more about her own problems, and then disappears before I ever get a word in. Now mind you, I'm painfully shy and extremely passive until pushed to a limit. And then I am a bombshell. So I never pushed her for conversation. But I did always assume as a friend she would eventually listen to me. Well, this goes on for the winter, and I slowly start to hold on to these feelings of regret. Because the entire time she's staying with us, she's being a bad roommate on top of being a poor friend. She would constantly leave her elder dog out of its kennel because she felt bad, but then the dog would get into trash or use the bathroom on the carpet. And since I was always first home, I wasn't just going to leave the messes on my floor. I never made her feel bad for it though. Just repeatedly suggested she kennel it. She would leave bags of food in the room, and we never had any problems with ants until she started staying here. And with that one time I went up into her room and found a BK cup tipped over, spilling onto my cloth dresser. Still, I kept letting things go, reminding myself she'd be gone once summer hit. And she was. Well, this year comes along and John and I think maybe it'll be better. We've had more time to get ourselves together. John has a new job, which keeps him away most days, and it'll be nice to have the company of my best friend again. John was hesitant but opted to give in because I promised it'd be different. And it was. Just wad. Different worse. Now Jane is with, let's call him Richard for obvious reasons. Richard. He's a 45-year-old man with a daughter of his own, and all he does is verbally abuse Jane. Telling her things like, "I've never seen anyone put on weight as fast as you." And yet Jane won't leave Richard. Which is whatever, not my place to tell her. Especially since John and I started off rocky. Not that rocky. And we were also 21 and 19, respectively, but still. I wouldn't have a problem with Richard, but one time Jane forgot her phone at his house during one of their arguments. I saw him on a ring and sent her a text saying, "Hey, I can't get to the door, but I see Richard is here. Everything okay?" Richard proceeds to text me aggressively about how he knows Jane and I are talking, because we texting, well, Jane has nothing but a phone, and Richard had it, so I'm not sure how we were talking, but needless to say, I now have beef with some man I could take out at the knees. And Richard apologized to me by telling Jane he was sorry and to tell me. And I'm not sure about you all, but it didn't feel like he was apologizing to me. It felt like he was apologizing to Jane about me, and she just vomited out the same words to me. This man called me immature, stupid, and implied I was because he didn't like what I was saying. This 45-year-old man, with his own daughter. Nonetheless, Jane and Richard have caused several issues, from screaming outside my house in front of my nosy neighbors, who happen to be friends with my mother, to Jane shooing up on my front door with arms filled with luggage, and a dog kennel, and even her off-leash dog running amok. I no longer have any respect for Richard and his childish nature, and I've made it clear he's not welcome here. Not to mention the room. Same things happened. Jane wouldn't kennel her dog, dog made messes, I constantly cleaned them up. Never made a big deal out of it, as I have 4 of my own animals, including 1 dog, and I understand these things happen. Whenever I didn't work, she'd leave her dog for me to babysit, and she would pay me in a few plants, but what John and I really wanted was just for her to deal with her own dog. Then, she finally kennels Redog, and the dog ruins my curtains. They weren't that expensive, so I wasn't going to pressure her or be mean to her about it. However, in the moment, this was upsetting, so I left the damaged curtains on top of the dog kennel, hoping she'd just apologize and we could move on. She didn't. That was months ago, and now she says I never knew. The room itself is about 108, which is very, very small. It's a large closet, basically. How she didn't notice something in that is amazing. True talent. We did raise her rent for this winter to $275. Still extremely cheap, as someone else offering a room near us is charging $650, and only went down to $600 upon Jane's request, and it'll never be there. We were even willing to lower our $275 because we felt it was too much for what she was getting. In the house that cost $600, she wouldn't even have her own bathroom. So realizing now, Jane has a pretty good deal here just with rent alone. Not to mention, she leaves an item trail from our front door, up our stairs, across re-landing, and to her room. Also, mind you, she has an elderly small dog. I have a very young medium dog. SETI have made a secure, safe place on our stairs for the elderly dog, including giving up an entire laundry basket so that he has a place to sleep. She not only doesn't secure him on the stairs, meaning he can get into her room and trash, but she will fill his basket with shoes, and then she'll leave him in the stairs knowing he has nowhere to lay. On top of that, Jane will then leave water bowls all over the footing of the stairs, where we often step and spill them. The stairs are carpeted. John and my entire house is carpeted almost. Bathrooms and kitchens are the only exceptions, and looking back, I could have trapped him in her bathroom, but it gets so hot. Upstairs, I was always concerned for Jane's dog. While she was off fighting with Richard over the dumbest things like her acne and how he's making Rudolph jokes towards her. Now the trash. Never have ever had problems with ants, but this year weirdly we do. And we know that someone in the house is constantly leaving trash in their room. A week later, we're back to leaving trash in my dishes upstairs. Man, oh man, does this girl order DoorDash. My parents know I can barely work, yet see a constant flow of DoorDash and Amazon packages, and am sure they're wondering where I get the money. Funny enough, it isn't mine. She has no care to hide the fact that she is not supposed to be living here, and has had no problems risking it for John and I. And although I am sure I could sway my own mother into letting us, why would Jane want to put me in the position to have that conversation when we're already doing her a solid by letting her stay here for the winter? No. Oh, did I not mention the dishes? Jane would use our dishes, which is fine, even though I primarily use paper dishes, so I was almost solely washing what she used. But I even told her, don't worry about washing them because I'm OCD. It'd be better if I did it. It was fine, until she started bringing her personal dishes she bought down for me to wash. I still did it because I didn't think too much about it. I'm already doing dishes, right? It's not that any of these things alone are that big of problems. It's that it kept going. Jane kept taking more and more and more. And if all that wasn't enough, wait until you hear about the laundry. Our basement is a Michigan basement. It's gross and I'm embarrassed of it. It also contains our washer and dryer. To avoid my embarrassment, I sucked it up and told her I'd wash her clothes. With a few exceptions, such as bring them down on Mondays and I'd do laundry. She never did. She'd wait weeks and pile up loads of clothes and then just smile and say, "Sorry, I'm a postbuat." And that's not an exaggeration, that's verbatim. On top of that, she'd wear several outfits a day. I watched her change her clothes 6 times in one day. How many different outfits do you need? We live in a town with less than 10,000 people. Who are you dressing up for? And she never once thought, oh, I wore a lot. Maybe I should take some clothes somewhere else. she just assumed that I would wash all over them with no problem. I finally stopped asking her to bring them down because it wasn't my problem. What? And that's Jane's favorite thing to say. It's not my responsibility. She's 28 years old, and still hasn't learned that sometimes we take on other responsibilities just because we are white. Farmers. I mean, adults, haha. Jane wouldn't offer to work a shift for me and my birthday because it wasn't her responsibility. And then after making me feel guilty for even implying she could work it, she tried to make me feel guilty for not just asking her. As if it isn't hard hearing her and moan about, well, why can't this 16-year-old kid with 3 brain cells do it by themselves? And the 16-yo is a cool kid, no hate against them, but they can't do my job alone. If I need them as backup, and I've been doing it for almost 10 years, then why would they be able to alone after a year? You might ask yourselves, I thought you said winters, but it's fall now. And this all sounds recent. That's because Jane decided with Richard that she wasn't going away for the summer. Jane didn't ask John nor I. Jane just assumed we'd be okay with it. Because if you can't gather, we are good people. And I am a people pleaser, sadly. Not to mention that we are extremely against the use of hard drugs. To each their own, but family has affecting both John's and my lives, with substances such as meth and coke. And so we aren't here for it. Jane once showed up at 4 a.m. very drunk, yet very hyper. It didn't take a genius to figure out she had snorted coke while staying under my roof. Knowing my feelings on the matter, some have even said Richard is supplying Jane, and that's why she stays. It breaks my heart. But I'd never hate her, but I'd certainly mother her over it, as I already have. And I told her if she did it again under my roof, she'd be gone for good, because we just don't move like that. Unrelated. But I had a coworker tried out thinking that I would save him. I only offered to let him shower because his water was turned off, and I was trying to be a good person. Needless to say, he went to jail shortly after that, for unrelated incidents. Probably for the best, bless his soul. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to why we don't like the use of hard drugs. So I've repeatedly given this girl everything just to be ignored and taken advantage of. And when I say ignored, I mean ignored. I'm not going to pretend I'm perfect. I'm petty for sure, and my personal emotions have spilled out into irrelevant conversations with Jane. I've gotten snippy over work-related things that I definitely shouldn't have. But she thought, oh, there's something wrong. Maybe if I avoid and ignore her, and Olin to move out without saying anything, everything will be fine. I didn't know she was planning to finally move out after 6 months. Even though it wasn't supposed to be 3 at max. But so, I finally confront her about rent. See, Jane thought you paid for rent at the end of the month. She paid for the month of July, on July 19th, and called it early. And I just laughed and shrugged it off. At least we were getting the rent right. I finally tell her today rent for August is due. And if Yum planned to be here for September, then it needs to be paid within the first week. She proceeds to tell me how I've been rude towards her. I have been. Deserved. Deserved. The only time I felt I could get a word in between her complaining about work or Richard, was when I was being rude. I suppose I'm sorry for that, but should I be? I mean, I do truthfully and honestly feel guilty, as I know I could handled it better. But I have asked her, told her we need to talk. I really need a friend. And then when I wasn't ready the one and single time she wanted to talk, she took that as a, we just don't need to anymore. She just assumed I'd text her my issues, even though she made it very, very clear she doesn't like texting conversations like that. However, back to I'm painfully shy and passive. I find it very hard to be any kind of confrontational, even if it's gentle, and not meant to be in a mean or aggressive way. But now I'm sitting here wondering, am I the... After 2 years of this, of feeling unheard and used, after trying to give Jane a second chance, and showing signs that she also needed to work on herself and our friendship, I feel as IDA because I finally let it all out. I have other friends telling me I did a good job at articulating myself and my emotions, but they're going to agree with me as I'm their friend. And they've watched me cry over Jane ignoring me and treating me second-rate. I know I've definitely given Jane more than she's ever offered me, but she is always going through something with some guy, and some mistakes she's made. And sometimes the mistakes are big and I've always been there for her, never judging her or making her feel bad for these decisions. And even when she brought drugs into my house, I didn't make her feel bad. But I feel so guilty for telling her everything that she has refused to hear in a few texts. AITA?